What if I told you that the single most revealing military decision of this entire war happened 3 weeks ago, and almost nobody noticed? No breaking news coverage, no emergency press briefings, no dramatic footage from the front lines, just a series of quiet orders, issued in the middle of the night that tell you more about where this conflict is heading than every headline, every map update, and every political speech combined. What actually happened on the Eastern Front is something that the people in charge do not want you to understand, and the silence around it is the loudest signal of all. Before I walk you through exactly what was ordered, why it was ordered, and what it means for the future of this war, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button right now. It takes less than 2 seconds, it costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that serious, unfiltered analysis deserves a real audience. If you are new here, subscribe immediately and tap that notification bell. This is not a channel that softens the truth to make it comfortable. This is where we look at what is actually happening. You will not want to miss what comes next. For months, the story we have been told about the Eastern Front has followed a familiar script. Russian state media paints a picture of steady, methodical progress. Telegram channels celebrate every small tactical gain in villages most people cannot find on a map. Political figures in Moscow describe an operation proceeding with discipline and strategic clarity toward its stated objectives. The language is precise and consistent across every platform. Tactical success, operational momentum. Strategic initiative firmly in our control. If you only consume Russian media, you would believe that this conflict is unfolding exactly as planned, that every move is deliberate, every sacrifice is justified, and victory is a matter of time, not a matter of doubt. But there's a vast yawning gap between what is said on television and what is ordered on the ground. And in the past 3 weeks, that gap has become impossible to ignore unless you are deliberately not looking. The senior commanders who actually lead Russian formations, the professionals who bear personal responsibility for outcomes and have access to the real numbers behind the propaganda, have made a series of decisions that tell a fundamentally different story. These generals have ordered a retreat, not a tactical withdrawal from one contested village, not a minor adjustment along a single sector, a retreat, a systematic, ordered withdrawal of forces across multiple sectors of the Eastern Front simultaneously. And almost nobody is talking about it. I need you to stay with me through this entire analysis. By the time I am done walking you through what was ordered, why the commanders who ordered it made that choice, what it reveals about the actual state of Russian military capacity, and why the silence around it matters as much as the orders themselves, you will understand something about this war that the daily frontline updates have entirely failed to communicate. This is not about a few kilometers of territory changing hands on a digital map. This is about what those changes reveal when you understand the decisions that produced them. Let me start with something that most coverage skips entirely. What does it actually mean inside a military institution for a senior commander to order a retreat? Because the answer to that question is the key to understanding why these orders are so significant. In any army, anywhere in the world, ordering in advance when conditions are favorable is straightforward. Holding a well-supplied, well-fortified position is standard procedure. Launching an attack against a known objective is what military forces train for. These decisions carry risk, but they align with the institutional narrative. They move in the direction that military culture celebrates. Retreat is different. Retreat is one of the hardest decisions a commander can make. It is an admission, a public, irreversible, physically visible admission, that the situation has deteriorated beyond what the commander can manage with the forces available. It says the cost of holding this position has exceeded the cost of abandoning it. It says the resources consumed by staying in place, the lives, the ammunition, the equipment, the degradation of adjacent sectors, are no longer justified by the strategic value of the ground being held. That is not a tactical calculation. That is a strategic judgment, and it is a judgment that carries enormous institutional weight. Inside the Russian military specifically, that weight is even heavier than it would be in most other armies. The Russian military institution is built on a foundational mythology of endurance. The historical memory of the Second World War, the stories of Stalingrad, of soldiers who held their ground against impossible odds, of an army that never retreated and never surrendered, is not just propaganda for external audiences. It is internalized by officers who trained within this system, who absorbed its values during their formative years, who organized their professional identities around its principles. For an officer steeped in this tradition, issuing a withdrawal order requires something extraordinary to be happening on the ground, something that overrides decades of institutional conditioning, something that cannot be rationalized or reframed within the language of triumph and endurance that the institution demands. And there is another dimension that makes these orders even more telling. Inside the Russian military, information does not flow upward cleanly. The system is designed, deliberately, structurally designed, to filter bad news at every level. Junior officers learn early that delivering unfavorable reports carries professional risk. Commanders at every echelon have strong incentives to minimize problems, to frame setbacks as adjustments, to present difficult situations as manageable challenges rather than indicators of systemic strain. This means that by the time information reaches senior generals, it has been cleaned, softened, and repackaged multiple times. The reality on the ground is always worse than what the reports describe. So when a senior general, operating within this culture of institutional filtering, still concludes that the situation requires a retreat, that conclusion is extraordinarily significant. It means the general had to cut through layers of institutional denial to reach the truth. It means the reality on the ground was so undeniable, so far beyond the capacity for reframing, that even a system built to obscure it could not hide it. The general looked at the real numbers, not the sanitized ones in the official reports, but the actual casualties, the actual supply levels, the actual condition of his forces, and decided that holding the position was no longer survivable. That decision, made against every incentive his institution provides, tells you more about the state of this conflict than any intelligence briefing or satellite image ever could. Now, here is what has actually been ordered. Over the past 3 weeks, Russian command has issued withdrawal orders across at least 4 distinct sectors of the Eastern Front. These are not coordinated parts of one large-scale operation. They are individual decisions made by different commanders in response to the specific crises their sectors are facing. The fact that they are happening at the same time, across a wide geographic spread, tells you that the underlying problem is not isolated. It is systemic, it is widespread, and it is accelerating. In the northern Donetsk sector, Russian forces holding positions on the western flank of a salient received orders to pull back. The official framing has been careful and measured, but the operational reality is unambiguous. These forces were in positions that had become functionally surrounded. They were not breaking out of encirclement or executing a clever tactical maneuver. They were contracting inward because maintaining the outer perimeter was consuming soldiers and equipment at a rate that could not be sustained. The withdrawal is not solving the problem. It is making the problem smaller, literally by reducing the perimeter that needs to be defended, while accepting that the forces involved are weaker than they were before. In the central Donetsk sector, the withdrawal orders struck at the heart of Russia's offensive capability in that region. The positions affected had been serving as staging bases for sustained offensive operations, forward-oriented positions built specifically to project force outward toward Ukrainian lines. When Ukrainian counterpressure intensified beyond what those positions could absorb without offensive capacity to justify the cost, the commanders made a painful but rational decision. Pull the forces back, shift from an offensive posture to a defensive one, preserve what remains for future use. That transition, from offensive staging ground to defensive withdrawal, is not a minor operational shift. It is a declaration that the offensive in that sector has run out of steam. In the southern Donetsk sector, the withdrawal orders were driven by the brutal arithmetic of logistics. Russian forces in certain forward positions were consuming supplies, ammunition, fuel, medical materials, replacement equipment, faster than the overstretched supply chain could deliver them. Holding those positions was not merely unsustainable in isolation. It was actively draining resources from neighboring sectors, weakening the overall defensive posture in exchange for maintaining ground that could not be held without continuous resupply that was simply not coming. The commanders sacrificed these positions to preserve the fighting capacity of sectors they judged more critical to the overall defensive line. And in the northern Zaporizhia direction, Ukrainian advances had moved past the flanks of Russian positions, leaving the defenders at genuine risk of encirclement. Staying in those positions meant accepting the growing possibility of being cut off entirely, a scenario that would have turned a difficult situation into an irreversible catastrophe. The withdrawal order in this sector was not a strategic choice. It was a survival imperative. Move now, or face the prospect of losing not just the position, but the forces holding it. 4 sectors, 4 different crises. One unmistakable conclusion. The commanders on the ground, the professionals with access to the reality behind the official narrative, looked at the situation and decided that holding their current positions was no longer worth the cost. That convergence of independent judgment, multiple commanders in different locations, facing different problems, reaching the same verdict, is the most important signal to emerge from the Russian military in months. It is not a fluke. It is not a local anomaly. It is a pattern. And patterns, when they emerge across independent commands simultaneously, tell you something fundamental about the reality that produced them. This is where the silence becomes its own story, and perhaps a more important story than the retreats themselves, because these withdrawals are not being described as retreats. Not by anyone, not by Russian state media, which is executing its usual choreography of linguistic gymnastics. Not by Western analysts, who are dutifully updating their frontline maps without examining the institutional decisions behind the movements. and not by the Russian military command itself, which is communicating upward through the same filtered language that has distorted its reporting throughout this entire conflict. The Russian media machine has developed an entire specialized vocabulary for describing retreats without ever deploying that word. Positions are not abandoned, they are vacated as part of a planned redeployment to more favorable terrain. Units do not retreat. They rotate to prepared positions and operational depth. The front line does not move backward. It is adjusted to optimize the defensive architecture for greater strategic efficiency. This language is deployed with mechanical consistency across every channel, every report, every broadcast. Its purpose is singular and explicit: to prevent the Russian domestic audience from understanding that their military is giving up ground. It fought months to capture and present it as permanently secured. Western media covers this conflict with genuine dedication and substantial resources, but the analytical methodology has a structural blind spot that becomes glaringly apparent in moments like this. Most coverage tracks territorial change as its primary and often sole metric. Kilometers gained, kilometers lost, areas shaded in different colors on digital maps. This approach tells you what happened on the surface, but nothing about the decisions that produced the result. A map shows that a position changed hands. It does not reveal whether the defenders fought to the last and were overwhelmed by superior force, or whether their commanders ordered them to withdraw before serious contact even occurred. The institutional significance of an ordered retreat, the meaning of senior commanders deciding that a position is no longer worth defending, is invisible to analysis that focuses only on geography and ignores the decisions that move the lines. And the Russian military's own reporting culture compounds the problem at every echelon. Field commanders do not describe their withdrawals as retreats in their official communications. They describe them as tactical adjustments, as repositioning in response to localized pressure. They call them optimization of force disposition. Their superiors receive those reports and add their own layer of professional interpretation before passing them further up the chain. By the time information reaches the general staff, the retreat has been thoroughly transformed into an operational refinement. The political leadership, which is supposed to be making strategic decisions based on this information flow, receives a version of reality that has been scrubbed and purified beyond any connection to actual events. This creates a remarkable and dangerous paradox. The generals who ordered the retreat know it is a retreat. The soldiers executing the withdrawal know it is a retreat. Everyone directly involved understands what is actually happening, but every institutional system designed to communicate that reality is working to ensure that nobody else acknowledges it. The military reporting chain, the state media apparatus, and the political communication framework are all involved. The truth exists in the orders themselves, in the physical movement of troops away from positions they held and bled for, but it is surrounded by such a dense architecture of institutional denial that it becomes invisible. It is hidden from anyone not directly on the ground. Before I go further, I need to ask you to do something. If you are still watching, if this analysis is clicking for you in a way that mainstream coverage never has, take 10 seconds. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Tap the notification bell so you get alerted the instant new analysis drops. And share this video with one person. Just one. A friend, a family member, a colleague, someone in a group chat. This kind of analysis does not spread by accident. It spreads because viewers like you decide it should. Be the reason someone else sees through the noise. Now let me talk about what happens after the retreat orders. Understanding the decisions themselves is only half of the picture. The other half, or the half that almost nobody is discussing, is what happens to the forces after they leave. And this is where the implications become genuinely alarming. When a military retreats, it does not retreat into a vacuum. It retreats to positions that have been identified on planning documents and operational maps, identified as the next defensible line. In an ideal scenario, fallback positions have been prepared well in advance. Fortifications have been constructed. Minefields have been laid across every likely avenue of approach. Communication trenches have been dug, camouflaged, and integrated into a coherent defensive network. Supply routes have been established and tested under operational conditions. The retreating force arrives at a position that is ready to absorb the pressure that drove it from the previous one. This is what competent military preparation looks like. But that is not what is happening here. The positions that Russian forces are retreating to have not been adequately prepared. They exist on planning documents as the next logical defensive line. They have been identified, mapped, labeled, and incorporated into operational plans, but the physical engineering work has not been completed. Weeks and months of labor required to transform open ground into a fortified position have not happened. In many cases, it has barely begun. There was simply no time. The retreat happened faster than the preparation. The crisis arrived before the solution was ready. This creates a critically important dynamic that deserves careful attention. Each step of the retreat takes Russian forces to a position that is weaker than the one they just abandoned. A position they spent months building, constructing fortifications and laying mines, is being surrendered, and it is being replaced by a position that exists only as a line on a map. No prepared fighting positions, and no integrated fortifications, no established supply infrastructure, nothing but open ground and a plan that was never executed. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian forces advancing behind the retreating Russian units are not facing the same degradation. Quite the opposite. They are advancing into ground that the retreating force spent months preparing for its own use. Trenches that Russian soldiers dug with their own hands are available for Ukrainian forces to occupy. Fortifications built over months of labor are now in the hands of the opposing side. The infrastructure that was supposed to protect Russian forces is now protecting Ukrainian forces. Every position abandoned becomes a gift to the advancing enemy. This dynamic produces what military analysts call a positional deficit. Each retreat cycle widens the gap between defensive capability and offensive capability. The retreating force gets weaker with each step backward because the positions it occupies grow less capable. The advancing force gets stronger with each position it captures. Not only because it gains territory, but because it gains prepared infrastructure. The asymmetry compounds with every cycle. The trajectory this sets is not a dramatic collapse. It is not the kind of sudden catastrophe that dominates headlines. It is something slower, steadier, and in many ways more damaging than a sudden break. It is a progressive erosion of defensive capacity, a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in the balance of capability along the front line, a shift that becomes visible in the accumulation of dozens of small decisions, each one individually defensible on its own terms, each one collectively pointing in a single direction. And this is the trajectory that the general's retreat orders have put in motion. They chose these orders because they concluded the alternative would produce an even worse outcome. They are not reversing the deterioration, they are managing it. They are choosing how to lose ground, not whether to lose it. And that distinction is the most important thing these retreats reveal about the current state of this war. I want to spend a moment on the human dimension. It is easy to lose sight of individual experience when analyzing strategic calculations. Every retreat order translates, at the ground level, into a deeply personal human experience. A soldier who has spent 3 months holding a fighting position receives a directive. Pack your gear and move to these coordinates by this time. He knows exactly what it means and knows the ground he is surrendering. He knows the trenches his unit constructed and the positions his comrades were wounded defending. He knows which dead ground provides cover and which roads become impassable after heavy rain. All of that knowledge, all of that labor, and all of that sacrifice is being handed over. He also knows, with absolute first-hand certainty, that the official explanation does not match his experience. He has seen the supply shortages and watched his unit shrink as casualties mounted. He has felt Ukrainian pressure on his flanks growing stronger with each passing week. And when he hears the words tactical repositioning, he understands what those words are designed to conceal. This gap between lived experience and official narrative erodes something fundamental. It erodes trust. A soldier who has personally experienced a retreat will not believe the next reassurance he receives. That disbelief does not stay contained. It spreads through a unit like a virus. It creates a collective skepticism that no amount of propaganda can fully repair. You cannot unteach a lesson that someone has learned through direct and painful experience. And retreats, by their nature, are lessons that every soldier in the unit receives at the same time. The retreat orders are, paradoxically, the most honest communication to emerge from the Russian military. They are honest because they are operational orders, not media statements crafted by professionals. The officers who issued them bear personal responsibility for the consequences. When you order forces to vacate a position, the position stands empty. When you order a retreat, the map changes. No narrative, no matter how sophisticated, can fully obscure that physical reality. The general spoke in the only language that ultimately carries weight in military affairs. They spoke through orders issued, troops moved, and positions vacated across 4 separate sectors simultaneously. The mainstream coverage will eventually catch up, but the window for understanding these events is now. The forces are moving, the positions are being vacated, and the real story is written in ground changes. If this analysis helped you, subscribe, hit the bell, comment your assessment, and share this video today.